Hello again and welcome back to the channel. This is Michael from TOEFLresources.com. In today's video, my new TOEFL speaking templates. In just a moment, I'll give you templates for all 4 speaking questions on the TOEFL test. I'll give you sample answers that use those templates. And if you stick around all the way to the end, I'll give you some words and phrases you can use to personalize the templates or even just to make your own templates. I'll also give you my top 5 TOEFL speaking mistakes at the end of the video, so make sure to stick around for those. Let's get started by talking about question 1. This is pretty straightforward question. You're given 45 seconds to speak and give your personal opinion on some matter of importance. The template I recommend is on the right-hand side of the screen. Start that template by clearly stating your main point. Just say, personally, I think, and then directly answer the question. Straightforward, right? And then say something like, first of all, and give a supporting reason. After that, use for instance, and either give a personal example or just elaborate on that reason. Give me more details. If you have time, you can include a second reason, starting with something like moreover. Now, you don't need a second reason. One reason is totally fine. It's one of the most common questions I get. I promise you, you can still get a perfect score with just one reason. But if you've got time, you can include a second one. In terms of time, on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see how I recommend that you use the time. First up, I think you should spend about 8 seconds stating your main point. Not too much time. Just clearly, directly state your main point, your direct response to the question. Then I recommend about 25 seconds on the first reason and 12 seconds on the second reason. Yeah, the second reason is going to be a little bit shorter. You're not going to include a personal example or so much elaboration. I find this approach is safer. If you have a shorter second reason, it makes it always easier to include a long and detailed and strong first reason. And that's best for most students, I find. Let's put that template into use with a sample answer. So I start with a direct main point. Personally, I think it's a great idea to give children homework on a daily basis. And then I have my first reason, which is nice and long. First of all, it helps youngsters retain what they learn for a much longer period of time. The only real way for kids to master new skills is to actually go home and repeat them as much as they possibly can. And in the long run, this kind of thing leads to more academic success. And then I use for instance, and I give a personal example. For instance, when I was in elementary school, I mastered long division by doing questions in my bedroom every evening. Now I'm studying engineering at university. And that could be the end of my answer. If I'm kind of a slower speaker, that might take up all 45 seconds, and that's fine. But if I do have a bit more time, I use moreover, and I give a second reason, which is a bit shorter. Next up is question 2. This is the campus announcement question, where first of all, you read a short announcement about a change that's happening on campus or a change that might happen, and then you listen to 2 people talk about it. You have 60 seconds to speak. Here's the template I generally recommend. First up, I start by just stating what the change is, according to the announcement, and then I state the change, 1 sentence. And then I give the 2 reasons for the change, which are mentioned in the announcement. This is because reason 1 and reason 2. I keep it short and concise. I don't need all the details here. I just need the 2 reasons kind of stated broadly. After that, I very quickly state the opinion of the man or woman from the conversation. The man opposes this. The man supports this. And then I spend the rest of my answer stating the reasons for his support or the reasons for his opposition. To begin with, he points out that. Moreover, he argues that. In terms of timing, I spend about 6 seconds stating what the change is, and then 9 seconds stating the reasons for the change. So I've got just about 15 seconds talking about the announcement. That's it. And then most of my time is spent talking about the conversation. 3 seconds very quickly stating the opinion, and then about 42 seconds talking about the reasons for that opinion. Note that in this template, like in all the templates, I have not included a conclusion. In my opinion, conclusions are a waste of time and they're kind of repetitive. Don't feel obligated to include one. They're not mandatory. If you do have some time to kill and you don't have anything else to say, go ahead and put in a conclusion, that's fine. But don't feel that it's necessary, because it simply is not. Let's talk about a sample answer that uses this template. So I start with a pretty concise summary of the announcement, the change, and the reasons for the change. According to the announcement, the campus fitness center will be closed. This is because the school can't afford to maintain it properly, and students can go to private gyms in the city for free if they want to exercise. The man opposes this. And then I spend the rest of my answer talking about the 2 reasons that the man gives for opposing it. To begin with, he points out that. Moreover, he argues that. Now, you're probably noticing that you can easily personalize these templates already, right? You could say, to begin with, he says that. To begin with, he claims. To begin with, he argues that. To begin with, he feels. Or first of all, he says. Like, these templates are very easy to change, and I encourage you to do so. Make them your own. Make them personalized, and you'll feel more confident if you kind of make the templates yourself. We'll talk about that more at the end of the video. But like here in the sample answer, I won't read it all, but I just want to stress most of the time is spent talking about the conversation, the reasons that the man opposes the change or the reasons that he supports the change. That's your main focus. That's where most of your score comes from. Let's move on to question 3. This is the one where, first of all, you read a short paragraph about some academic concept, and then you listen to a professor talking about that same concept. You have 1 minute to speak. So here's the template I recommend. Start by stating what that concept is. The reading is about concept. And then you just kind of fill in the blank. Usually this is the title of the reading, of the paragraph. So make a note of it. This is, and then you briefly describe it. Maybe 1 sentence, just kind of getting the most important detail from that paragraph. And then a quick transition. The professor elaborates on this. And then first he explains, mention the first example he gives. Next, he notes that. Mention the second example he gives. Now, sometimes it's 1 example only, but it usually has 2 clear parts, like a beginning and an end, or just 2 things that are being contrasted. So you can use the template, like no matter how the lecture is structured. In terms of timing, spend about 15 seconds summarizing the reading and the concept. Spend like 4 or 5 seconds on that transition, and then 20 seconds on each of the examples or each of the points given in the lecture. Again, most of your time is spent speaking about the lecture because that's where most of your score comes from. Here's a sample answer. By the way, if you want to get the questions that these are all based on, I'll put a link in the video description down below. So in this case, the reading was about convergent evolution. And so that's just my easy peasy first line. The reading is about convergent evolution. This is, and then I define it. This is when animals living far apart from each other evolve to have similar features or characteristics. And then I've got my transition. The professor elaborates on this. And again, you could change this, right? The professor gives a couple of examples. The professor tells us more about this concept. Like whatever you want to say, it's probably good. So go ahead. And then one after another, I talk about each of the examples. First he explains, next he notes that. And that's what I'm spending most of my time on. Let's talk about question 4. This one's a little simpler. You merely listen. There's no reading. You're going to listen to a short lecture. It's usually about 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, about some kind of academic topic. And then you got to kind of summarize it in your answer. Now, the thing to remember here is that the lecture is usually about 2 of something. two ways, two things, two effects, two changes. And the template reflects that. So start out by stating what that is. The professor explains two ways that animals survive in the dark. Or the professor explains two effects of the Industrial Revolution on life in London. Or the professor explains two changes that happened when humans started farming. Do you see what I mean? It's usually going to be about two of something. After that, mention the first one, first of all, and then say to be specific and give more details, as many as you can remember. And then say secondly, and mention the second thing. Then use something like the professor says and mention more details. In terms of timing, spend about 10 seconds stating what the main idea is, and then spend about 25 seconds on each of those two things, each of those two ways or effects or changes. So what I want to emphasize here is that the template is kind of forcing you to really focus on the specific examples given in the lecture. That's where most of your score comes from. Let's take a look at a sample answer. Begins with the template. The professor explains two ways animals survive in environments without much light. First of all, some animals have special eyes. To be more specific, the spookfish uses tube-shaped eyes to hunt its prey in almost total darkness. And then I give all the extra details. Secondly, some animals can produce their own light. The professor says the lanternfish does this to both catch prey and escape from predators. And then I give a whole bunch of details about that. So, I mean, the template for this answer, it's pretty slight. Like, I think this is the question where the template is kind of like the least useful because your answer really depends, entirely on your ability to listen to details and to take notes and remember them. But, the template does kind of force you in the right direction, which is the direction of focusing on those specific examples and kind of ignoring some of the other stuff from the lecture. All right, so that's the collection of templates. There's 4 questions. There's 4 templates. There you go. Now, as I've said all along, I encourage you to kind of personalize the templates, make them your own. And if you want to do that, here are some transitional phrases you can use that might come in handy. I mean, if you're talking about cause and effect, you can use things like accordingly or as a result. If you're trying to add more details or, combine things, you could use furthermore or moreover. If you're contrasting and comparing things, use things like in contrast or although or on the other hand. And if you're just kind of bringing in specific examples, use phrases like for instance or specifically or to illustrate. Now, even if you're not going to make your own templates, even if you're going to use my templates 100%, make sure that you use these phrases when you're filling in the blanks. Like, I can't tell you exactly where to use them because it does depend on the specific question, but make sure your answer does contain a few of these phrases. They will improve your score, I promise. All right, you guys have stuck around all the way to the end of the video, which is really incredible. I'm so happy. So I'm going to tell you something that isn't about templates. First of all, I am going to take a drink of coffee because you can hear my voice is going hoarse. Excuse me. And with that out of the way, I'm going to tell you about the top 5 mistakes that I hear when I'm checking student answers in the speaking section. And again, this is not template specific, but since you stuck around, I want to give you some bonus advice. First up, students often speak too slowly. I hear from students who have really good English skills, but they speak too slowly. And then their score goes down. Like what happens is they try to sound like their teacher does in front of the classroom, right? And they'll say something like, personally, I think that the best way for students to work on assignments is to do them in groups. I feel this way for 2 reasons. Do you see what I'm doing there? I'm speaking too slowly because I want to sound like a teacher. Don't do that. You want to speak at a natural pace or even a little bit more quickly than a natural pace. That's very important when it comes to your TOEFL speaking score. Second of all, it's bad time management. Some people don't really know the best way to use the time they have in the speaking section. So, like they get the reading and they get the lecture, in question 3, for example. And they think, well, I'll spend half my time summarizing the reading and I'll spend half my time summarizing the lecture. That makes logical sense. Well, not really. It's important that you study with videos like this and you kind of learn the best way to use your time. And I've explained that just a moment ago. So pay attention to those details. But on the other hand, sometimes I get students who are like, yeah, I don't need to mention anything from the reading. So for question 2, they don't summarize the announcement. Or for question 3, they totally ignore the definition of the concept. They don't even mention the concept. That's a problem. You do need to use the reading. Yes, the reading is less important, but it is there for a reason. It's not just decoration. So you do need to summarize the reading to some extent. Number 4, sometimes I hear answers that have really good language skills. They're very clear. They have good grammar, but they don't have any of those transitional phrases that I showed you a few minutes ago. So make sure you put those into your answers. Learn how to use them. Likewise, I sometimes hear answers that don't really include conjunctions. Now, I can't turn this video into a grammar lesson, but make sure you know what a coordinating conjunction is and what a subordinating conjunction is and try to use them in your answers. I think that'll increase your score. Lastly, bad practice questions. There's a lot of really terrible and inaccurate TOEFL speaking questions in books and on websites and in YouTube videos. If you're studying with bad questions, you're not going to learn what you need to do on the test. Your study time might be wasted. So make sure you're using good questions. If you want my opinion about some book or some website, mention it down in the comments below. I'll check it out. I'll tell you what I think. Or if you really want to be careful, I do recommend just using questions from ETS. They're the ones who make the TOEFL, so their books are the most accurate. Their websites are the best. So, they do have a ton of practice questions. You could just focus on those most of all. All right, I am going to leave it at that, but if you want to find more of my junk, stop by TOEFLresources.com. That's my website where you can find guides to every section of the test. And you can also sign up to have your speaking answers evaluated and scored by me. Same for your practice essays. That's a service that a lot of people seem to really like. Meanwhile, stick around to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe. There should be a new video in a few days. I think I'm going to upload TOEFL writing templates in the next few days. So stay tuned for those. All right, I'll leave it at that. Take care, guys. I'll see you real soon.